Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is BestInSlot, and tonight I'm going to bring you guys a little bit of a visual guide to sizing your dinosaur exhibits in Jurassic World Evolution. Now, this is quite important, maybe not on your first playthrough and stuff, but let's say you're trying to plan out a certain type of park. You're going to want the ability to plan out your exhibits beforehand and know exactly what each dinosaur requires in order to give them a happy exhibit. The way dinosaur sizing and exhibits work in this game is that population and social are not affected by exhibit size. Basically, if a dinosaur has the minimum requirements they need, as in grassland and forest percentage of a total exhibit size, then they'll be happy no matter how many dinosaurs you put in there up to the population cap. Now, I'm going to link a little guide down below that I've talked about before, but it's a very good little Reddit guide, and you can find it in the comments. And that Excel spreadsheet will show you the requirements, as in total exhibit size for each dinosaur, but given there's no way to measure this in the game, it can be a little bit confusing. Let me just send a ranger team to my very sick dinosaur over there. So let's say the Struthiomimus, for example, requires, I'm going to call it meters squared. I'm not quite sure what it is. Let me just check. Is it in here? Forest, no, right, 2,500, I don't know what it is, it's mile, I don't see how it requires 2,500 meters squares of grassland when clearly that's not what it's got here. I'd ignore that, basically. Struthiomimus total requires about 35 meters squared, that's what we're going to call it, of exhibit space in order to be happy. And this is actually substantially more. You could put a Struthiomimus, I believe, in an exhibit about half this size, and it would actually be okay. You're going to hit one of these, there we go. The reason it's in an exhibit this size, and you'll have had the same problem, is that basically when it comes to putting in forest, which the Struthiomimus does require at least a little bit of, you can see there, by the way, look at the grassland, how much excess we have right there. That's because we can't make the exhibit any smaller without cutting out the forest. I've tried to cut it down here and everywhere, and it kind of complains about it, it just doesn't really work. So this is probably about 15 meters, no, this is probably about 50 meters squared, I'd say, if not a little tiny bit more. More than you need for a Struthiomimus, but the point is, now that this Struthiomimus is in here and happy, and this is a small exhibit, look at it, it's tiny. The Struthiomimus has a population cap of, I believe, about 20, social group 20. You could put 20 Struthiomimuses in this exhibit right here with absolutely no problem at all. Population and social is not at all governed by exhibit size. I don't know why. For me, that is utterly ridiculous, but basically each dinosaur has a minimum exhibit size. As long as you hit that, and as long as you get the balance between grassland and forest right, which is hard to do in these very small exhibits, your dinosaurs will be happy. Struthiomimus isn't a good example because of the size of the exhibit, so let's move on to one over here. This is the Dinosaurus. The Dinosaurus requires an exhibit of about 100 meters squared. That's about this. I'm going to give you... What are my guests? About 100 meters squared. I'm going to give you a better example in a second, but about 100 meters squared, you can see there the grassland and forest is just above the minimum point. So basically, any dinosaur that requires 100 meters squared or less for their exhibit could happily live in an exhibit like this, again, up to their population limit. Now, for reference sake, if we were going to build an exhibit, let's use the electrified heavy steel fence. You'd say it's about that long, it's about one... Okay, that's a good example. Basically, to be safe, for any dinosaur that requires 100 meters long, stretch out the full way, like so. You probably don't even need to do that. If you do one stretch by one stretch, by one stretch, by one stretch, you'd say that's about right, right? Yeah, I'd say that right there. These are probably 10 by 10, so that's probably 100 meters squared. No, wait, no. You know what I mean? Basically, one full stretch of the fence is enough, like that. Just stretch it as far as the mouse possibly goes. Do that 4 times, and that seems to be approximately, based on that, 100 meters. Those are about the same size, you'd say. I'd say they're about the same size. So, any dinosaur 100 meters or less, you can do in that, and just follow the guide. You know, the game doesn't really give you this information. The game is actually very obscure in the dinosaur information it presents to you for some reason, but hey ho, I'm not here to judge. Moving on, we have our 200 meters, and again, this is a weird one for me because it doesn't look... It looks more than twice the size, right? But if we click on our Deinonychus, you'll see the grassland and the forest are just above the precipice, really only just there. Deinonychus requires about 200 meters squared for its exhibits. And again, if you wanted a little reference, if you're trying to make this for yourself, obviously mine's all bendy in and stuff like that because I've been kind of like, I built like a big square exhibit, put the dinosaurs in, and then cut them in little bit by a little bit until it was at the absolute minimum. But if you're going to use a fence to do this, 1, 2. And then the side is probably just over 1. So a 2 by 1 is basically... Actually, a 2 by 1 would probably be enough to keep a Deinonychus happy. A 2 by 1 is about... That makes a lot of sense, right? Wait, I'm gonna do like a little comparison here. Sorry, this is all coming together in my head as well. So, if we did a 1 by 1... That would be your Dinosaurus exhibit, right? And that's 100 meters squared. If we do a 2x1, that is 200 meters. It's double the size, and is about the size of the Deinonychus exhibit. It seems to me they require maybe a little bit more. They could be like a 208. A lot of these dinosaurs aren't exactly on those numbers. You'll see it in the guide. But maybe it's a 208. Maybe you need to go a little bit higher. But generally speaking, that's a 200 meter exhibit. That's a 100 meter exhibit. And if we move on to our 300 meter exhibit, that's over here. This is our Diplodocus, and you'll see again, grassland and forest just above the minimum requirement there, and Diplodocus is absolutely perfectly happy. You know, sauropods have this habit of being really hard to control, but I think one of the reasons they are hard to control is because people put them in gigantic exhibits. Now, because of how they search, basically what a dinosaur does is, if we're looking at it from above, a dinosaur has a search radius around it, which is searching for the environment that it needs. If it hits the forest, if it hits the grassland, it registers that, and the search radius is probably, by the looks of it, bigger than this exhibit right here, or about the same size. When it hits the fence, that search radius stops, so it doesn't look for the environment beyond the fence. It looks in a circle, or a shape of some description, I don't really know, probably a circle, around the dinosaur within the confines of the exhibit. So if you have a massive exhibit, and you don't have if you don't have forest constantly throughout the exhibit, then as your larger sauropods wander through that exhibit, they're going to walk into areas with grassland. The search radius is going to pick up primarily on the grassland, and then they'll start bitching and moaning. The same problem happens because as they walk to a fence, that cuts out half their search radius. So if your exhibit's quite large and has a little bit of a balance in terms of environments, and they're only searching half the radius, they're going to look into the exhibit and maybe get only forest, and therefore no grassland, or vice versa. That's why, like, it's important to have big exhibits for variety and looks, but if you're trying to be efficient and you're trying to look after your sauropods, you maybe don't want to go for massive exhibits. For what it's worth, I think this is a dreadful, terribly designed system. I see no reason for it to matter. I don't know why it's designed the way it is. I think it's ludicrously stupid, and I really hope it gets fixed. The fact is, the dinosaurs should just register the entire exhibit. It should just put it in the exhibit. That should affect population, in my opinion. It should affect social, in my opinion, and it should definitely affect the environment. But whatever, I'm just trying to show you guys how to do it. So that again is a 3x10, and again, like, if it's that, yeah, that's 300 meters. So that one there is only 3 times bigger than this exhibit right here. Again, it might be a little bit bigger. The Diplodocus could be like 325 or something like that. It does appear there's a little bit of leeway here, wherein that does not look 3 times bigger than that to me. But it's 300 meters squared as opposed to 100 meters squared times 3, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. Yeah, so it's like 3 of those next to each other and then 3 of those on top of each other. You know what I mean. Hopefully this is making sense, but that's about the minimum for a Diplodocus. Now, the biggest dinosaur in the game in terms of size requirements is Brachiosaurus at about 425, but the second biggest and very close to the 400 mark is the Monstrous. So that's about this size there. You can see how it jumps up 100, 200, 300, and this is about 400. They do also have a social need a little bit as well. You can see the grassland's a little bit over there. It could go a tiny bit lower, but generally speaking, I think if you did it like this, let's have a little look at this, shall we? All right, we're about there. So let's go across by 2. No, let's go across by 3. Say that's about right, wouldn't you? I say that fits pretty perfectly into there. It's about a 3x3. I think the maximum exhibit you will ever need in this game is a 4x4, as in a 4 fully stretched ones of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up again 4x4. You probably don't even need that. You probably never need to go that high to look after even the biggest dinosaur in the game in terms of size requirements, i.e. the Brachiosaurus. The main challenge comes from when you have the smaller size thingies. Like the Monstrous has a very high forest requirement, as you can see. It means there's not much room to put anything else because you need to hit that forest requirement. So you kind of need to really cram it in there. But the more I've been doing this video, the more I'm thinking, is this actually useful for anyone? And I really hope it is, guys. I was trying to give you guys a reference point for how you design these exhibits. Really what you should be doing is checking the guide. Really what I wanted to do was bitch a little bit about this requirement and how the environment is handled in this game, but also showcase just how small you can do these dinosaur exhibits. Now, I know people don't want to make small exhibits necessarily, but as more and more and more dinosaurs get added to this game, and more of us want to build parks with every single dinosaur in them, if we don't get bigger parks, this is the kind of thing that's going to become necessary in order to fit all the species into one park, which is something I firmly believe we should be able to do. So if we want to continue doing that, which is already somewhat difficult with 48 dinosaurs, you're going to need to do stuff like this. You're going to actually need to measure out your exhibits 100, 200, 400, etc, etc. That makes sense? Hope this was helpful. I have no idea if this was helpful. Please do let me know in the comments below. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I think this was pointless. But if it helped even one of you, it was totally worth it. If there is any topic in Jurassic World Evolution you would like me to cover, either discussion, talk about, predictions, guides, anything at all, please do let me know. I have so much time played in this game by now. We've done a lot of stuff on it already, but I'd love some ideas, whatever you guys want to see, whatever plans you'd like to see me talk about or whatever. I am going to go because I'm going to melt into my chair if I don't stop talking and open the window. Thank you so much for joining me. As per usual, I'll see you lovely folks next time. Cheers, much love. As always, bye-bye. Quick little shout out at the end. This video and others like it would not be possible at all without the support of you guys watching me at home, and also everyone on this Patreon page right here who supported me in the last month. If you want to help out as well, you can do so at patreon.com/bestinslot. Every little really helps. Cheers.